In the suffocating silence of the bedroom, she whispered a name. Just one name.
Zara.
And he froze. His whole body locked up, heart pounding so hard she could have heard it. But she didn't hear. Because she thought he was asleep. And the name that fell from her lips wasn't his. 3 months earlier, this same man was on top of the world. Marcus Okonkwo wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of wealthy that makes people stop and stare. The kind of wealthy where the driver opens the door of the gleaming black Bentley every morning at 7:15. The kind of wealthy where his signature is worth more than 100 people's annual salary. Businessman, investor, real estate magnate. At 42, he had built an empire that started with a single commercial office and now sprawled across 3 continents. His company, Okonkwo Capital, was synonymous with power. When he entered a room, conversations stopped. Not out of fear, out of respect, out of recognition of who truly pulls the invisible strings of money and influence. And by his side, always, was her, Zara. 36 years old, skin dark as polished ebony, eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. Former model, now philanthropist, organizer of charity galas that brought together the African elite. She wore dresses that cost as much as cars. She smiled for cameras with the confidence of someone born for it. When she walked, there was a natural grace, a perfect balance between elegance and power. Magazines loved photographing them together. The perfect couple, the union of 2 worlds. Him, the business brain. Her, the heart of society. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of dinners at embassies, trips to Dubai and Monaco, synchronized smiles at public events. 10 years where everything seemed perfectly calibrated. The 23-bedroom mansion in Lagos, the penthouse in London, the beach house in Cape Town. Everything meticulously organized, every detail a declaration of status. The staff knew exactly where Marcus liked to have breakfast. Zara had a personal assistant who coordinated her schedule with military precision. Even the family dog, a Saluki with an impeccable pedigree, had its own professionally managed Instagram account. From the outside, it was flawless. From the inside, it was comfortable. There were no scandals, no public fights. Marcus worked 16 hours a day. Zara managed her foundation and organized events that moved millions toward noble causes. They talked about investments, about which wing of the children's hospital should receive the next donation, about whether they should buy the property adjacent to the mansion to ensure more privacy. Practical conversations. Conversations of people who had built something solid together. But Marcus began to notice small things. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to and say, this is wrong. Just subtle shifts in the texture of daily life. It started with the phone. Zara had always been discreet with technology. Never the type who lives glued to the screen. But Marcus noticed that suddenly she was checking messages with a different frequency. Not constantly, not obviously, but at specific moments. After dinner, before bed, when she thought he was busy in the library answering emails. And there was something else. A new lightness in her movements. A smile that sometimes appeared without reason when she looked at the screen. Small expressions that Marcus, trained to read people in boardrooms, couldn't ignore. One afternoon, he was in the home office when he heard Zara's voice in the hallway. She was on the phone. Her voice was different, softer, more intimate. He couldn't make out the exact words, just the tone. And when she hung up and entered the room, the smile vanished instantly, back to the neutral, controlled expression she normally wore. Marcus said nothing. Because what would he say? You smiled on the phone? Absurd. Paranoia of a successful man who was perhaps working too much. But the seed was planted. 2 weeks later, Marcus came home early from the office. A canceled meeting, a rare, free afternoon. He entered through the side door, the one that led straight to the kitchen. He heard voices in the living room. Zara talking to someone. He approached quietly, not to spy, but simply because he was still in work mode, half distracted, thinking about other things. Zara's voice. No, not now. He could arrive any moment. Pause. I know, but we need to be more careful. Marcus stopped. His blood ran cold. He stood in the hallway, out of sight, processing. Who was she talking to? About what? Then he heard footsteps. Quick ones. Zara approaching. He retreated instinctively, went back out the side door, closed it gently, waited 5 seconds and opened it again, this time with the normal sound of someone who just arrived. "Hi, honey," he called out loudly, voice controlled, casual. Zara appeared from the living room, face perfectly composed. Polite smile. "Marcus, you're back early. Meeting got canceled. Thought I'd enjoy the afternoon here." He watched her. No sign of nervousness, no flush, no hesitation. She was good. Very good. "How wonderful. I was just thinking about having the chef prepare that pasta you love." Normal conversation. Couple conversation. Marcus nodded, smiled back, but something inside him had changed. Because that phrase he heard, "He could arrive any moment," had no innocent context, no comforting explanation. It was the kind of phrase you say when you're hiding something. And the other phrase, "We need to be more careful." We. Who is we? Marcus didn't confront. Men like him don't confront without evidence, without a plan, without control of the situation. He built an empire not by acting impulsively, but by observing, analyzing, waiting for the right moment. So he started paying attention. Real attention. The driver, James. Loyal for 8 years. Always punctual. Always discreet. Marcus never thought much about him. James was part of the household. Like the security team. Like the house manager. Necessary, but invisible. Except now, Marcus noticed things. Like how James always had a certain smile when Zara got in the car. How he adjusted the mirror in a way that let him see her perfectly in the back seat. How one afternoon, Marcus saw Zara touch James's shoulder as she stepped out of the car. A brief touch. Nothing obvious, but familiar. The kind of touch you don't give an employee. The kind of touch that speaks of intimacy. Marcus felt the bile rise, but he swallowed it. Observed more. There was the day Zara said she was going to the spa. Marcus discreetly tracked the family car's location through the company's GPS system. The car went to the spa, stayed there for 20 minutes, then went to a residential neighborhood 40 minutes away, stayed parked for an hour and a half, then returned. When Zara came home, she was relaxed, radiant. "The spa was wonderful, darling. You should try that hot stone massage." Marcus nodded. "Maybe I should." But he knew. He knew she hadn't been at the spa for 4 hours. He knew the car had gone somewhere else, and he knew she was lying as easily as she breathed. The betrayal was still theory, but the lie was fact. And Marcus Okonkwo didn't tolerate lies. He needed certainty, not suspicion. Absolute, undeniable certainty. The kind that leaves no room for doubt or interpretation. And then, on a quiet night while drinking 30-year-old Scotch whiskey in the library, the idea came. A test. Simple, elegant, conclusive. He would pretend to be sleeping, sound asleep, and see what Zara would do when she thought he wasn't watching. Because people reveal their truths when they believe they're alone, when the mask can drop, when nobody's watching. Marcus had learned this in business. The best information comes not from what people say in meetings, but from what they whisper in hallways when they think no one important is listening. So he waited, planned, chose the right night. A Friday when Zara always seemed more relaxed, more loose. He had dinner normally, talked about trivialities. Went up to the bedroom at 10:30, as always. And at 11, when Zara entered the room, he was already lying down, slow breathing, eyes closed, body still. The perfect performance of an exhausted man who fell into deep sleep. He heard her footsteps, soft, barefoot on the expensive carpet. Felt the mattress sink slightly when she lay down beside him. Waited. Each second was an eternity. Each breath had to be precise, natural, deep. 5 minutes, 10, 15, and then she moved, grabbed her phone. Marcus heard the almost imperceptible sound of the screen lighting up. Heard her typing, heard her breathing change, becoming faster, more anxious. And then, in the suffocating darkness of the room, she whispered, "Samuel." Just a name. But that name destroyed 10 years of marriage in a single second. Marcus didn't move. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to get up, confront, demand explanations. But he forced himself to stay still, because now he knew, and now he needed to know more. She entered the room with light, almost silent steps. The hallway light drew her silhouette for a brief moment before she closed the door. He kept his eyes closed, breathing deep and rhythmic. Every muscle in his body was tense, but outwardly he seemed in absolute peace. She watched him for long seconds, waiting, making sure. When she finally seemed convinced he was sleeping soundly, she moved to the armchair near the window. That's when the cell phone light illuminated her face. She typed something quickly, then brought the device to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice was a whisper so low he had to control even the rhythm of his breathing to hear. Yes, he's sleeping. His heart raced. Each beat echoed in his ears like a war drum. "I can meet you tomorrow. Yes, at the usual place." The usual place. The words cut like blades. There was a usual place. This wasn't new. It wasn't an isolated mistake. It was something established, routine, planned. She laughed softly. An intimate laugh. The kind of laugh he thought was reserved only for him. I know. It's risky, but I need to see you." He felt something turn in his stomach. A mixture of rage, pain, and a morbid curiosity that consumed him from within. Who was on the other end of that call? And why was she talking like this, with this urgency disguised as tenderness? Marcus. The name left her lips like a shared secret. Marcus, the driver. The man he had hired 6 months ago. Perfect references, experience with prominent families, discreet, professional, trustworthy. Or at least that's what the resume said. He fought against every instinct that screamed for him to get up, rip the phone from her hand, and demand explanations. But no, not yet. He needed more. He needed to understand the extent of this. "I miss you too," she whispered, and after a pause, "Tomorrow. I promise." The call ended. She sat for a few more minutes, staring out the window, lost in thoughts he couldn't reach. Then she got up, put away her phone, and lay down beside him as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just driven an invisible knife into his chest. He remained motionless until her breathing became slow and deep, until he was certain she was really asleep. Only then did he allow his eyes to open in the darkness. Marcus. The name echoed in his mind like a sentence. He got up carefully, left the bedroom, and went down to his office. He turned on the computer and began reviewing every interaction, every moment that might have gone unnoticed. The memories began to reorganize themselves like pieces of a sinister puzzle. 6 months ago, the opening party for her new art gallery. He was busy with investors when he noticed Marcus helping her carry some canvases to the car. Nothing major. It was his job, after all. But now, reliving that moment, he remembered her smile, the way her fingers brushed against Marcus's as she took one of the frames. Coincidence? He continued sifting through the memories. 3 months ago, she had come home radiant after a lunch with friends. She said she'd had a great time, that she needed to go out more often. He was happy to see her so cheerful. But Marcus was also off that day. He remembered because he needed a substitute driver for an important meeting. Coincidence? 2 weeks ago, she casually mentioned that Marcus had recommended an incredible restaurant. "He has impeccable taste," she said, smiling. "You should try that place, honey." At the time, he didn't think anything of it. Now, every word took on a different weight, a hidden meaning. They weren't coincidences. They were signs. Signs he had ignored because he trusted, because he loved, because he never imagined that someone so close, someone he had allowed into the intimacy of his life, could. He stopped, took a deep breath. He needed concrete proof. He couldn't act based only on suspicions and mental reconstructions. Not yet. The following night, he repeated the performance. Quiet dinner, casual conversation. Went up to the bedroom earlier, claiming fatigue. Lay down, pretended to fall asleep, and waited. She came in half an hour later. Again, the cautious steps, the careful observation, the certainty of his deep sleep. Again, the phone illuminating her face in the dimness. But this time, the conversation was different. "I know it's difficult," she whispered. "But he can't know. Not yet. Not yet." As if there were a plan, a right moment to reveal, to destroy everything. "I wish it were different too, Marcus. But this is what we have for now." Her voice carried a sadness that confused him. Was there guilt there? Regret? Or just the weight of maintaining a charade? "Tomorrow we'll meet and talk more. About everything. About everything." What else was there? What other layers of this betrayal were still hidden? "I can't keep doing this," she said, and her voice nearly broke. "But I also can't stop." Those words echoed in the silence of the room like a confession. She was trapped, divided between two realities. And he, lying there pretending to sleep, was trapped too. Trapped between the desire to confront and the need to understand completely. The call ended. She cried softly for a few minutes before lying down. He had never seen her cry like that. Not when they lost their first major investment. Not when her mother passed away. But now, because of Marcus, she cried with a vulnerability that should have been reserved only for moments between them. That was the worst part. It wasn't just the physical betrayal that was tearing him apart. It was the emotional intimacy, the sharing of weaknesses, the trust she placed in another man. He spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing beside him. Every time she moved, he wondered if she was dreaming about Marcus, if the plans they were making included a future without him. In the morning, she woke up and acted normally. Kissed him, asked about his commitments for the day, suggested they have dinner together that evening. The normalcy was the most disturbing part of it all. How could someone live two lives so completely separate? How could she look him in the eyes and lie so easily? He went down for coffee, watched Marcus in the distance, washing the car. The man worked with efficiency, professionalism. Nothing in his posture suggested anything beyond dedication to his work. Was Marcus also a talented actor? Or was there something else happening? Something he still couldn't see? A new question began to form in his mind. A possibility that left him even more unsettled. What if Marcus knew about the test? What if he was part of a larger plan? He shook his head, trying to dispel the paranoia. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. He needed answers. He needed irrefutable evidence. That afternoon, he made a decision. He wasn't going to wait passively anymore. He wasn't going to keep pretending to sleep while his life crumbled around him. Tomorrow, when she went to meet Marcus at the usual place, he would be there. Not as the deceived husband crying in corners, but as the man who built an empire through strategy and intelligence. He was going to discover the truth. All of it. And then, only then, would he decide what to do with the ruins of what he once called a marriage. Because one thing was certain. He wasn't going to wait anymore. He wasn't going to observe passively anymore. Tomorrow, everything would come to light. And he didn't even know if he was ready for what he was about to discover. The billionaire's voice was cold as steel when he uttered the words that would change everything. "I need to know everything, every detail, every movement, every breath." On the other end of the line, the city's most expensive private investigator made a calculated pause. It wasn't the first time a powerful man had hired him because of a wife. But there was something different in the urgency of that voice. A mixture of controlled anger and poorly disguised desperation that signaled this case would be extraordinary. The investigator accepted immediately. When dealing with the elite, money is never an obstacle. It's just a tool. And at that moment, the billionaire's money was about to buy the truth, no matter how painful it might be. 24 hours later, the surveillance operation was complete. GPS trackers discreetly installed in the vehicles. Microscopic cameras in strategic points. Advanced phone monitoring that would capture every call, every message. Modern technology has transformed investigation into an exact science. There's no secret that can resist the methodical gaze of cutting-edge equipment and trained professionals. The investigator started with the obvious. Follow the wife. document every outing, every meeting, every moment away from the mansion. In the first few days, the reports were precise and impersonal. Shopping at the luxury mall, lunch with friends at the private club, yoga sessions at an exclusive studio. The predictable routine of a high society woman. But then came the first real shock, captured in high-definition video at 2:37 p.m. on a sunny Thursday. The billionaire's wife entered a sophisticated cafe in the heart of the financial district, looked around with visible caution, and sat at a discreet table in the back. 3 minutes later, he arrived, the driver, wearing casual clothes, not the uniform. He sat across from her with the familiarity of someone who had done this many times before. The investigator adjusted the zoom on the hidden camera and began recording. This was the moment that would validate all suspicions. Professional confirmation that the billionaire wasn't crazy, wasn't paranoid. His suspicions had concrete foundation. And that confirmation did something dangerous to the betrayed husband's mind. It transformed anger into certainty. Certainty is fuel. Certainty justifies extreme actions. But the truth, as always, was more complex than any hasty certainty. The investigator was methodical by nature and experience. One meeting doesn't make a case. Solid evidence requires patterns, repetition, context. So he dove deeper, reviewing bank records, analyzing communication histories, reconstructing timelines. What he discovered in the following days painted a disturbing picture. That wasn't the first meeting, nor the second. Security camera footage from commercial establishments, cross-referenced with GPS data, revealed a striking truth. The wife and the driver had been meeting regularly for at least 3 months. Always in public but discreet locations. Always around the same time. Always lasting approximately 45 minutes. The pattern was unmistakable, methodical, deliberate, planned. But then the investigator did what good professionals always do. He investigated the other side of the equation. Who really was this driver? The background check revealed something unexpected. Before working for wealthy families, the man had another life. A completely different life. He had been a businessman, owner of a mid-sized logistics company that, for years, thrived serving the export sector. He had his own office, a fleet of vehicles, employees. He wasn't as rich as his current employers, but he lived comfortably. He had dignity. He had a future, until everything collapsed. A series of fraudulent contracts, a dishonest partner, lawsuits that dragged on for years. The company went bankrupt. He lost everything. The house, the savings, his reputation. The cruel fate that turns businessmen into drivers, reduces dreams to monthly salaries, crushes pride into necessary subservience. This discovery should have been irrelevant to the case. But something bothered the investigator. Why would a man with that history risk everything for an affair with the boss's wife? It made no sense from a risk-benefit perspective. He had already lost everything once. Why risk losing again? The answer came through the wife's bank records, starting exactly 3 months ago. Coinciding perfectly with the beginning of the secret meetings, the billionaire's wife began making cash withdrawals. Always significant amounts, always in cash, impossible to track digitally. $1,000 here, $2,000 there, sometimes $5,000 at once. The investigator cross-referenced the dates. Each withdrawal corresponded exactly to a meeting with the driver. The pattern was mathematical in its precision. The billionaire, upon receiving this report, felt his rage explode into bitter triumph. There was the definitive proof. She wasn't just cheating emotionally, she was paying for it, financing the affair with family money, using the fortune he had built to support her lover. The humiliation was complete. The betrayal had a price, and he could calculate it exactly to the penny. But the private investigator didn't share the same certainty. There was something wrong with the complete picture. Some piece that didn't fit. And experienced professionals have learned to trust that discomfort, that feeling that the obvious narrative might be hiding the real truth. So he decided to go beyond passive surveillance. He installed long-range listening devices, directional microphones capable of picking up conversations from 30 meters away. Military technology adapted for civilian investigations. Illegal? Technically, yes. But when you work for billionaires, certain legal lines become negotiable. At the next meeting, he positioned the equipment perfectly. The cafe had outdoor areas, which made audio capture easier. He waited, headphones adjusted, digital recorder activated, while the wife and the driver sat again at the same discreet table. What he heard in the following minutes completely challenged the narrative everyone had constructed. There were no words of love, no romantic conversation, no escape planning or passionate declarations. Instead, fragments of a completely different conversation came through the investigator's headphones. "How much is left?" The woman's voice, tense but controlled. "We're almost there. 2 more months, maybe 3. The driver's response, loaded with quiet gratitude. "You need to make sure you're doing this right. If he finds out." "I know. I know the risk you're taking." And then the words that changed everything. "This isn't about us. It's about paying back. It's about settling this debt once and for all." Debt, not love, not an affair. Debt. The investigator rewound the recording 3 times, making sure he'd heard correctly. His brain worked quickly, reprocessing all the evidence through this new lens. The regular withdrawals, the systematic meetings, the absolute discretion. It wasn't an extramarital affair. It was something completely different. But what exactly? What kind of debt would connect a billionaire's wife to a bankrupt driver? And why would she risk everything, lying to her husband, having secret meetings, diverting money to help an employee? The answer was somewhere in the past. In some event, some connection, some secret that preceded the driver's employment with the family. Something that had created an obligation so strong that the woman was willing to betray her husband's trust to honor it. The investigator compiled his report with unusual care. He presented the facts: the meetings, the withdrawals, the driver's history, the audio recording. But for the first time in his career, he added something rare, a warning. "Mr. Billionaire," he wrote at the end of the document, "the evidence suggests that your wife is hiding something significant. But I may be wrong about the nature of this secret. There are multiple possible explanations for the observed behavior. I recommend we continue the investigation before any confrontation." When the billionaire read that report, sitting alone in his private office, something strange happened. The rage that had consumed him for weeks began to mix with confusion. The mental script he had constructed, unfaithful wife, opportunistic lover, classic betrayal, began to crumble. If it wasn't an affair, what was it? If she was paying a debt, what debt was that? And above all, why couldn't she simply tell the truth? Betrayal, he discovered, has many faces. Sometimes it dresses itself in forbidden romance. But other times, it hides in financial secrets, in hidden loyalties, in pasts that refuse to stay buried. And when lies intertwine with something beyond desire, when secrets have deep roots in old obligations, truth becomes more than painful. It becomes dangerous. Because some truths, when finally revealed, don't just destroy marriages, they destroy everything. Reputations, fortunes, entire futures built on foundations of well-intentioned lies. The billionaire closed the report and looked through the glass window that offered a panoramic view of the city he had helped build. Out there, millions of people lived their lives, each one carrying their own secrets, their own lies, their own invisible debts. He had always believed that money bought truth, that sufficient resources could illuminate any darkness. But now, holding concrete evidence that raised more questions than answers, he faced a disturbing reality. Sometimes, the truth that money buys is just the beginning of the mystery, and the real danger isn't in what you discover. It's in what you still don't know. The phone vibrated with an urgency that made Marcus's heart jump. It was the private investigator. His voice sounded different this time. It wasn't the usual professional and distant tone. There was something there. Excitement? Disbelief? "Mr. Okonkwo, you need to see this immediately," he said, without the usual greetings. "I got the images you asked for, and I discovered something that will change everything." Marcus felt his blood run cold. This was the moment. The truth he had relentlessly pursued was finally within his reach. But why then? Did he feel a tightness in his chest? Why were his hands trembling as he held the phone? "Send everything now," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'd prefer to show you in person. There are things that need to be explained. Can you come to my office in an hour?" 1 hour. 60 minutes that seemed like an eternity. Marcus canceled all his meetings. told his secretary he was indisposed, locked himself in his office, unable to think about anything other than what he was about to discover. When he finally arrived at the investigator's discreet office, located in a commercial building far from the prying eyes of high society, Marcus was prepared for anything. Or at least he thought he was. The investigator received him with a grave expression. There was no triumph in his eyes, only something that resembled compassion. And that frightened Marcus more than anything else. "Before I show you the images, I need you to understand something," the investigator began, gesturing for Marcus to sit down. "Sometimes, when we search for answers, we don't like what we find. Not because the answer is what we imagined, but because it reveals something about ourselves." Marcus frowned, impatient. "Just show me what you discovered." The investigator sighed and opened the laptop. The first image appeared on the screen. It was from the meeting at the cafe. Amara and the mysterious man sitting at the table. But this time, the camera had captured a different angle. An angle that revealed something Marcus hadn't noticed before. The man's face was perfectly visible, and Marcus felt the world stop. It wasn't possible. "Do you recognize him?" the investigator asked gently. Marcus couldn't speak. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Because yes, he recognized him. It was impossible not to recognize him, even after so many years, even after time had shaped that boy's face into a man's features. "Chidi," he finally whispered. "It's Chidi, Amara's brother, the brother she had lost almost 20 years ago." The story came back like an avalanche of memories. Amara was 13 when her parents divorced brutally. The father took Chidi, then only 8 years old. The mother kept Amara. 2 children separated, sent to completely different lives. The father moved to another state, forbade any contact, said it was better this way, a clean start. Amara never stopped looking for her brother. Marcus knew this. She had mentioned it a few times in the early years of their marriage, but he never imagined she had found him, much less that she was meeting him in secret. "Continue," said Marcus, his voice hoarse. The investigator clicked to the next series of images. Documents, bank records, emails, text messages. Text. A complete digital trail that told a completely different story from the one Marcus had imagined. Chidi wasn't doing well. Far from it. 3 years ago, he had lost everything in a fraudulent investment. His company, his savings, his home. He was on the brink of total bankruptcy. Ashamed, desperate, with no one to turn to. Until, through a mutual friend, he had finally found the sister he hadn't seen in 2 decades. Amara has been transferring money to him regularly, the investigator explained, pointing to the bank records. Significant amounts. She helped him avoid bankruptcy, paid off debts. She's financing a new business for him. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. The cash withdrawals, the mysterious transactions he had interpreted as evidence of infidelity. They were simply a woman helping the brother she had lost and finally found again. "Why in secret?" Marcus asked, more to himself than to the investigator. But the investigator had the answer. He clicked on another file, an audio recording. Amara talking to a friend 6 months ago. His wife's voice filled the office. "I can't tell Marcus. You know how he is. He's always said that people who fail financially are weak, that they don't deserve respect. Remember when his partner lost money in that investment? Marcus cut off all contact with him, said he didn't have time for losers." Marcus felt nauseous. Had he said that? Yes, he had. And worse, he had believed it. His life philosophy was clear. You are what you build. Failure is a choice. Weakness is unacceptable. And now, there he was, discovering that his wife had hidden her own brother from him because she was afraid of his judgment. Because she knew he would see Chidi not as a man who had bad luck, not as family who deserved help, but as a loser unworthy of his time. "There's more," said the investigator, breaking the heavy silence. He showed messages exchanged between Amara and Chidi. Conversations full of sibling love, of longing for lost years, of hope for the future. Chidi thanking his sister for believing in him when no one else did. Amara saying that no matter how much money it took, She would always be there for him. And then, the message that completely shattered the reality Marcus had constructed. I know you're risking your marriage for me, Amara. If Marcus finds out and doesn't understand, if he leaves you because of this, I'll never forgive myself. Amara had responded, Chidi, you're my blood. I lost you once when we were children. I'm not going to lose you again. Marcus is my husband, and I love him. But you're my brother. I'll find a way to make this work. I just need the right moment to tell him. Marcus sank into the chair. Every whispered phone call wasn't with a lover, but with a brother. Every secret meeting wasn't infidelity, but family. Every penny withdrawn wasn't to sustain a betrayal, but to save someone she loved. And the documents at the law office. The investigator showed them. It was Amara establishing a trust fund for Chidi, ensuring he had financial security while he rebuilt his life. Everything done legally, everything documented, everything moved by pure and simple love. Are you sure about all this? Marcus asked, knowing the answer was obvious. I have DNA tests confirming the sibling relationship. I have all the legal documentation. I spoke with her lawyer, who confirmed the nature of the transactions. Mr. Okonkwo, your wife wasn't having an affair. She was being loyal to her family. Marcus sat there, in the silent office, while each moment from the past months recontextualized itself in his mind. The whispered phone calls weren't conspiracy, they were privacy. Amara was protecting Chidi's pride, preventing Marcus from hearing conversations about financial difficulties he would despise. The meetings at discreet locations weren't illicit romantic encounters. They were a sister trying to see her brother without exposing him to the cruel scrutiny of the high society Marcus frequented. Society he represented. Society that would judge Chidi as a failure. Amara's nervousness at home wasn't the guilt of adultery. It was the weight of keeping such a big secret. It was the constant fear that Marcus would discover and react exactly as she feared he would react. And Marcus realized, with brutal and painful clarity, that Amara was right to be afraid. Because if she had told the truth from the beginning, what would he have said? Would he have embraced Chidi as family? Or would he have despised the man as just another who didn't know how to manage his finances? He knew the answer, and it destroyed him. The investigator closed the laptop. Mr. Okonkwo, I need to ask, what do you intend to do with this information? Marcus had no answer, because the real question was another. What had he done? He had hired investigators to spy on his wife. He had violated her privacy. He had spent months suspecting, mentally accusing, building a narrative of betrayal that never existed. And all because he couldn't trust. All because his own arrogance and prejudices had created an environment where Amara didn't feel safe to be honest. The test he had applied to his wife had, in fact, revealed something about himself. And the result was devastating. Marcus left the investigator's office in a trance. He drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what he had discovered. The truth had freed him from suspicion, but it had imprisoned him in something much worse: shame. When he finally returned home, it was already night. The lights were on. Amara was in the living room, working on her laptop. She looked at him when he entered, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that froze him. She knew. Marcus, she said, closing the laptop slowly. Her voice was calm, but there was steel there. I got an interesting call today, from my lawyer. It seems someone has been asking questions about my financial transactions. Very specific questions. Detailed. Marcus felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He told me a private investigator reached out. Tried to be discreet, but my lawyer has known me for years. He warned me immediately. Amara stood up, and Marcus saw she was trembling. Not from fear, from anger. Tell me it wasn't you, Marcus. Tell me my husband didn't put me under surveillance like I was a criminal. The silence between them was deafening. I have nothing to say, Marcus finally whispered. There's no excuse. You hired someone to spy on me. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation, a verdict. I thought that I was cheating on you. Amara completed, tears finally escaping. You thought I was capable of that. After everything we built, After 8 years together, you didn't trust me enough to simply ask. You preferred to treat me like a suspect. I know about Chidi, Marcus said, the words coming out in a desperate rush. I know he's your brother. I know everything. Amara stopped, eyes wide, and then, to Marcus's horror, she began to laugh. A bitter laugh, without any humor. So now you know. After spying on me, after violating my privacy, after investigating my life as if I were a stranger. She wiped the tears with the back of her hand. Congratulations, Marcus. You discovered my terrible secret. You discovered I was helping my brother. What a heinous crime. Amara, please. Do you know why I didn't tell you? Her voice rose, all control breaking. Because I was afraid of you. Afraid of the man I married. Because I knew deep in my heart that you would judge Chidi. That you would see him as weak, as unworthy. And I was right, wasn't I? Admit it. Marcus couldn't look at her. I was protecting my brother from you, Amara continued, each word a stab. From the man who claims to love me, but whom I couldn't trust with the truth about my own family. And you know what's worse? You proved me right. Because instead of coming to talk to me when you started suspecting something, you put me under surveillance. You chose distrust. You chose control. The apartment, once a sanctuary of luxury and love, now felt like a prison. Two people who had vowed to spend their lives together, now separated by an abyss of mutual distrust. Marcus had tested his wife, and she had passed with honor. But in the process, he had failed. Failed as a husband. Failed as a man. Failed as a human being. The truth was revealed. But would their marriage survive it? The wife's words echoed through the mansion like thunder breaking years of silence. You hired someone to follow me? To spy on me? Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with contained fury, betrayal felt to the bone. While I slept beside you, you suspected. While I said I loved you, you doubted. The billionaire stood paralyzed. He had planned this moment 1,000 times, imagined 1,000 different responses. But now, faced with the raw pain in her eyes, all words seemed empty. I needed to know the truth. It was all he could say, his voice coming out weaker than intended. The truth? She laughed, a bitter sound that cut deeper than any scream. You want to talk about truth? You hired detectives, investigated behind my back, suspected the worst. You never came to me, never asked, never trusted. Because you lied. The words exploded from him, accumulated during weeks of silence. You lied about him, about who he was, about where he went all those nights, all those secret meetings, all that money I never knew where it was going. She recoiled as if she'd been slapped. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with years of unspoken words, unconfessed fears. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, but no less intense. I hid my brother from you. It's true. But do you know why? He didn't answer, his jaw tense, waiting. Because you never trusted anyone who struggled, who had scars, who wasn't born with everything served on a silver platter. Each word was an accusation, an open wound. You look at people who need help and see weakness. You look at those who've fallen and assume they deserve to fall. I knew your contempt for losers. How could I tell you that my own brother was among them? So you chose to deceive me. His voice was ice. Chose to hide, lie, make a fool of me while supporting a man I didn't even know existed. I chose to protect my brother from your arrogance. Her voice rose again, anger and pain mixed. He's not a charity project, not a failure. He's a man who fell, who fought addictions, who's rebuilding his life piece by piece. And I knew you would never understand that. You never gave me the chance to understand. Because you had already judged before even knowing him. The argument echoed through the mansion walls, two broken hearts screaming their truths, neither hearing the other. Both right, both wrong, both bleeding. And then the doorbell rang. They froze, looking at each other, breathing heavily, faces flushed. No one expected visitors. Not at this hour. Not at this moment. She looked at him, then looked away. I called him. When you confronted me, when everything exploded. I called. The billionaire felt his stomach tighten. You brought him here? To our home? He deserves to hear what you think of him, and you deserve to look into the eyes of the man you've despised so much without ever having met. The door opened before he could respond. The driver, no, the brother-in-law entered. Not with the stooped posture of an employee, but with the fragile dignity of a man who knew he was about to lose everything. His eyes met the billionaire's, and there was something there that not even money could buy. Honest courage. I shouldn't have accepted. The first words were direct, without beating around the bush, without empty excuses. When my sister offered me the job, when she insisted on helping me, I should have refused, should have said no. The billionaire remained silent, studying the man before him. He looked for arrogance, found shame, looked for defiance, found responsibility. But I was desperate. The driver's voice trembled, but he didn't look away. 5 years clean, sir. 5 years rebuilding what I destroyed. And still, no one trusts a former addict. No one gives a chance to someone who's already fallen. So you lied. The billionaire's voice was harsh, but there was something different now, a crack in the armor. I accepted her lie. Let her hide who I was because I needed that job. Needed to prove I could be trustworthy, even if the trust was based on half-truths. He took a deep breath. That was cowardice. I know. The wife stepped forward, tears flowing freely now. It wasn't cowardice, it was survival. No, sister. He looked at her with something that seemed like pain and love mixed. It was cowardice, because I let you carry my shame. Let you lie for my pride, and now your marriage is destroyed because of it. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't charged with anger, but with something deeper. Recognition. The shared pain of truths finally spoken. The billionaire looked at his brother-in-law, then at his wife, then back. For the first time in weeks, he didn't see enemies. He saw people. Wounded, imperfect, trying to survive with whatever dignity they had left. I hired investigators because I was terrified. The words came out of him like a forced confession, ripped from somewhere he didn't know existed. Terrified of losing you. Terrified that everything we built was a lie. Terrified that you were deceiving me, using me, waiting for the right moment to leave. She stared at him, eyes wide. And you thought hiring spies was better than simply asking? I couldn't ask. His voice broke finally, the mask of the ruthless businessman crumbling. Because if you confirmed it, if you said yes, that you were betraying me, I don't know how I would have survived that. So you chose to destroy trust before it destroyed you. It wasn't a question. It was understanding, painful and true. He nodded, unable to speak. The driver stepped forward, his presence now less threatening, more human. I understand, sir. I understand the fear of losing what's precious. I lost everything once. Family, respect, dignity. Everything burned in pursuit of a poison that promised relief and only brought destruction. His voice was steady now, carrying the weight of lived experience. And when you lose like that, when you destroy with your own hands, you never forget the terror of repeating it. The billionaire stared at him, really saw him for the first time. He didn't see weakness. He saw strength born from the fall. He saw wisdom bought with scars. I judged you. The words came out heavy, each one costing pride. Judged without knowing. Assumed that anyone who needed help was unworthy of it. Assumed that people who fall stay fallen because they deserve it. Many think that way, the driver replied softly. And for a long time, I believed it about myself too. The wife looked between the two men, tears still falling, but something different shining in her eyes now. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was possibility. I should have trusted you, she said to her husband, voice hoarse. I should have believed you could see beyond your prejudice, That you could look at my brother and see the man he became, not what he was. But I was terrified too. Terrified that you couldn't. And I proved you right. The admission came out of him like blood from an open wound. At the first suspicion, the first doubt, I didn't come to you. I hired strangers to invade your privacy. I chose control over trust. The driver looked at his sister, then at his brother-in-law, and then did something no one expected. He extended his hand to the billionaire. I'll leave. Today. I'll walk out of your life, the job, everything. Because her marriage is worth more than my pride. And if my presence is what's destroying you both, then there's no choice. No! The wife grabbed her brother's arm, desperate. I won't let you pay for this. You did nothing wrong except accept help when you needed it. And hide who I was, he insisted gently. That was my mistake. And I need to take responsibility for it. The billionaire looked at the extended hand. 5 years of sobriety. 5 years rebuilding. A man willing to sacrifice everything to save his sister's marriage. A man with more honor than most executives he met in polished boardrooms. Slowly, he extended his own hand. The grip was firm, equal. 2 men from such different worlds, connected by a moment of brutal honesty. I was wrong. The billionaire's words came easier now, as if a dam had burst. About everything. About you. About assuming wealth means strength, and poverty means weakness. About believing people who fall don't deserve to be lifted up. And I was wrong too, the driver replied. For accepting the lie. For letting my sister carry my shame alone. For not having the courage to face your judgment from the beginning. They let go, but something had changed in the air. The anger had given way to something else. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It wasn't restored trust. But it was the beginning of understanding. The wife looked at the 2 men, her heart torn between brotherly love and marital love, between blood loyalty and chosen commitment. I lied to protect, and I destroyed by protecting. You loved, her brother said softly. Loved with everything you had. It's not a crime. It's just complicated. The billionaire looked at his wife, really saw her. The woman who had carried so much weight alone. The woman who had tried to balance 2 worlds without letting either crumble. The woman who had loved both her brother and her husband with a ferocity that made her lie to protect them both. I made you afraid of me, he said, his voice heavy with recognition. I made you believe I couldn't love someone who wasn't perfect. That I would judge your family, your blood, your choices to protect those you love. She didn't answer, but her tears spoke for her, and you were right. He took a step toward her, then stopped, uncertain. I would have judged, would have looked at your brother with contempt, assumed the worst, refused to see beyond the fall. I would have been exactly the man you feared. But you don't have to keep being that man, she whispered. The silence returned, but now it was filled with possibility. Not with certainty, not with easy promises, but with a narrow and painful path ahead. A path that demanded both of them choose vulnerability over pride, honesty over control, forgiveness over justice. The driver looked at his sister once more, then at his brother-in-law. You 2 need to talk, alone, without me in the middle. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. But I need you both to know, my sister is the bravest person I know. She saved me when I didn't deserve to be saved. She believed in me when no one else did. She lied for me, yes. But it was the most loving lie anyone has ever told. And then he left, leaving husband and wife alone in the vast hall, surrounded by trophies of wealth that suddenly seemed so empty. She stared at him, waiting. He stared at her, searching for words he had never learned to say. Apologies, regret, admission of failure. I don't know if I can trust again, he finally said, honesty costing him every syllable. I don't know if I can live with someone who watches me instead of loving me, she responded, equally honest. The standoff was clear. The damage was deep. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't shouting. They were talking, really talking. But I want to try. His words surprised even himself. I want to learn to trust without controlling. I want to look at people who struggle and see courage instead of weakness. I want to be worthy of the loyalty you showed your brother." She closed her eyes, tears squeezing through her lashes. "And I want to learn to trust that you can love me even when I'm not perfect. Even when my family is complicated. Even when I choose to protect those I love, instead of protecting your image." "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Rebuilding, relearning, trusting again." "I know." She opened her eyes and there was something there he hadn't seen in weeks. Not blind hope, but determination. "But if we don't try, if we let the test you created destroy us, then it wins. Suspicion wins. Fear wins." He took another step toward her, then another, until he was close enough to touch, but still not touching her. "I'm sorry. For everything. For not being the man you needed. For creating an environment where you felt you had to lie to protect those you love. And I'm sorry too," her voice broke. "For not trusting that you could grow. For assuming the worst about your character before giving you the chance to prove otherwise." They stood there, separated by inches that felt like miles. Two broken hearts trying to decide if the pieces could be glued back together differently. Better, more honestly. Outside, the driver got into his car, not the gleaming limousine, but a modest sedan he had bought with his own savings. He drove slowly down the circular driveway, looking at the mansion one last time in the rearview mirror. His sister was in there, fighting for her own happiness, and he had given her the only thing he could, the truth, finally. The test had broken the couple. It had exposed every wound, every fear, every character flaw that both carried. But in the ruins of destroyed trust, something new was trying to be born. Not the innocence of before, not the blindness of a love that had never been tested, but something stronger, more real, something that could only exist after everything had been destroyed and both chose to rebuild anyway. The question remained, hanging in the air like smoke. Could honesty rebuild what suspicion had destroyed? Could two people so different, from worlds so distant, learn to trust again after mutual betrayal? The answer lay in the choices they would make in the coming days, in the difficult conversations they would have, in the vulnerability they would need to embrace, in the pride they would need to sacrifice. The test had revealed the worst. Now, only the bravest love could reveal the best. In the days following the confrontation, the house remained in heavy silence, the kind of silence that weighs on your shoulders, the kind of silence where every unspoken word takes up more space than any scream. He slept in the office, she in the master bedroom. They passed each other like ghosts, trapped between pride and regret. But there was something different now. Something had changed that devastating night. The truth, however painful, had opened a crack in the armor they both wore. And through that crack, something they had forgotten began to pass. Vulnerability. It was he who took the first step. 3 days after the revelation, he knocked on the bedroom door. She opened it, eyes red, rosary in her hands. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with the kind of exhaustion that comes when you finally stop fighting. "Talk to me about him," he said, his voice hoarse. "About your brother. Tell me everything. No judgments, no secrets. Just talk to me." And she talked. For the first time in years, she told everything. Their childhood on the streets of Lagos. How he protected her from bigger boys. How he went without food so she could have more. How he was arrested defending her honor when a man insulted her. How prison changed him. How his shame grew when she rose socially and he stayed behind. How she sent money in secret, not out of obligation, but out of love. Brotherly love. The only love she knew before she knew him. He listened to everything. And when she finished, he didn't say, "You should have told me before." He didn't say, "How could you hide this from me?" He simply said, "I want to meet him, the real him, not the ghost I created in my head." And in that moment, something began to heal. 2 weeks later, the meeting happened. Not at the grand mansion, not at an upscale restaurant where her brother would feel out of place, but at a simple cafe, neutral ground, where 3 people could just be themselves. The brother arrived guarded, eyes wary with the expectation of judgment. The billionaire extended his hand. Not as a boss, not as a savior, but as a man. "She talks about you constantly," he said. "Tell me about what you do." And they talked, really talked, about construction, about business, about the hard realities of trying to get ahead when you have talent, but lack connections. And it was during that conversation that the billionaire realized something crucial. Her brother wasn't weak. He wasn't incompetent. He was exactly like he himself had been once, just without the same breaks. "I have a proposal," the billionaire said, choosing his words with care. "My company is launching a new project, affordable housing development. I need someone who understands the communities we'll be serving. I'm not looking for charity work. I need real expertise. Are you interested?" The brother hesitated. Pride, that old companion, whispered in his ear, "It's a handout. You're getting this because of her." But then he looked at his sister. She wasn't pleading. She was smiling, a smile that said, "I believe in you." And he accepted. The first months were tense. The brother worked with fierce determination, determined to prove he deserved to be there. Colleagues watched with skepticism. Another friend of the boss, who got an opportunity without deserving it. But he didn't give them ammunition. He arrived earlier, left later, presented solutions no one else had considered because he had lived the problems they only studied. And slowly, skepticism transformed into respect. Meanwhile, the couple started therapy. Not because someone told them to, but because they finally understood that love, however strong, isn't enough when communication is broken. They sat in that office and dismantled, brick by brick, the walls of pride they had built. "I constantly tested you," he admitted in one session, his voice heavy with shame. "Every time you went out, every phone call, every message. I was always looking for proof of betrayal, because deep down, I didn't believe someone like you could really love someone like me." "And I hid everything," she responded, silent tears streaming down her face. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew where I really came from, you'd stop loving me. I hid my brother because I was hiding my shame." The therapist let silence fill the room. And in that silence, they both understood the devastating truth. They had been fighting enemies they themselves had created. 6 months later, the change was unmistakable. The brother was no longer the shadow whispered about in late-night conversations. He was Kwame, senior project manager, whose creative solutions had saved the company millions and, more importantly, built quality homes for hundreds of families. He carried himself differently now, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man who finally proves his value to himself. At a high-stakes investor meeting, something extraordinary happened. The billionaire was presenting the affordable housing project when one of the investors, a notoriously sharp questioner, asked a complex technical question about community integration. The billionaire smiled. "The best person to answer that is our project director. Kwame, would you take it?" All eyes turned. Kwame stood up, walked to the front, and spoke with a clarity and conviction that left the investors silent. He didn't just answer the question. He painted a picture of how business could serve communities while maintaining strong returns. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and the billionaire, watching from the side, felt something he didn't expect. Pride. Not the pride of ownership, but the genuine pride of seeing a good man finally receive the recognition he always deserved. Afterward, in a quiet hallway, he caught up with Kwame. "Thank you," he said simply. Kwame turned, taken aback. "For what?" "For proving me wrong. About you. About what family really means." Kwame moved to shake his hand, but the billionaire pulled him into an embrace instead. Brief, a bit stiff, but genuine. That evening, there was a celebration, not in some grand ballroom, but in their dining room, finally feeling like a home. The table was set. 3 places: sister, husband, brother. She looked at the 2 men she loved, sitting at the same table, laughing at a shared joke, and felt something break inside her. Not from pain, but from relief. The kind of relief that comes when you finally stop carrying a weight you didn't even know you were carrying. "You know," Kwame said, his tone lighter than she'd heard in years. I spent my whole life ashamed. Ashamed of where I came from. Ashamed of not being good enough. Ashamed of needing help. He looked at his sister, then at his brother-in-law. I almost destroyed your family because of that shame, because I'd rather be a ghost than risk being seen and rejected. The billionaire leaned forward. I did worse. I had everything. The money, the incredible wife, the life many dream of. But I let insecurity turn me into a man who tested loyalty instead of building it. I was so busy looking for betrayal that I almost created one. She took both their hands. And I learned that protecting someone from my fears isn't love. It's control disguised as care. I should have trusted you both. You, she looked at her husband, to see my brother as I see him. And you, she looked at Kwame, to show who you really are. For a long moment, none of them spoke. There was no need. Some truths are so deep that words only diminish them. Later that night, when Kwame left and the house returned to silence, the couple climbed the stairs together. For the first time in months, there was no tension, no unasked questions, just peace. She was getting ready for bed when he entered. She met his eyes in the vanity mirror. "What's on your mind?" she asked quietly. He came over, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I was thinking about how foolish I was. I tested you, set traps, hunted for proof of betrayal. And do you know what I found?" She waited. "I found exactly what I was afraid of finding. Another man's name on your lips, in your messages, in your accounts. But the test didn't expose your betrayal." He paused, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It exposed mine. The betrayal of not trusting. The betrayal of letting pride destroy something precious. That name you whispered wasn't evidence of cheating. It was proof of a love I was too stubborn to recognize." She turned to him, and now they both had tears in their eyes, but they were different tears, not of pain, of release. "Kwame got the promotion today," she said softly. "They're putting him on the international project. He's nervous." "He'll crush it," the billionaire replied, smiling. "He's like you, stronger than he thinks." She leaned into his embrace. "Thank you for giving him that opportunity, for seeing in him what I've always seen." "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me that family isn't defined by blood or perfection. It's defined by who we choose to love despite everything." And that night, lying together in the same room where everything almost fell apart, they slept in peace. Not because the problems had disappeared, but because they finally learned that trust isn't the absence of doubt. It's the choice to believe even when doubt whispers. 3 months later, life settled into a new rhythm. Kwame was in South Africa managing the international project, sending progress photos that filled his sister's heart with pride. The couple had built new routines, weekly dinners together, honest talks before sleep, and, most importantly, a commitment that no secret, no matter how scary, was worth more than honesty. But scars don't disappear completely, and they shouldn't, because scars are reminders. Reminders of battles survived, lessons learned, strength found in the darkest places. On a quiet evening, he found her on the terrace, looking at the stars. He sat beside her, and for a moment, they just existed in the comfortable silence of two people who finally truly know each other. "You know what I realized?" he said finally. All this time, I asked myself the wrong questions. I kept asking, is she cheating on me? When I should have been asking, have I made her feel safe enough to be honest?" He looked at her. "I built a home where secrets felt safer than the truth. And I let it happen," she said. "I let fear take the lead. Fear of how you'd react. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing all this." She gestured around. "But I nearly lost everything anyway. Not because you found out the secret, but because keeping it was destroying me inside." He took her hand. "If you could go back, would you do it differently?" She thought for a long moment. Yes and no. Yes, I would have been honest from the beginning. But no, because this. She squeezed his hand. Us now. This only exists because we went through the fire. Because we dismantled everything and rebuilt with more honest foundations. So we're stronger now? He asked with a slight smile. No, she said. We're more honest now. And honest is always stronger than perfect. And she was absolutely right. Because relationships built on perfect appearances fall apart under stress. But relationships built on flawed truth, on brave vulnerability, on choosing love every day despite the imperfections, those survive anything. There's a lesson here that transcends this specific story. A lesson about human nature, about love, about trust. Sometimes the tests we create for others reveal more about ourselves than about them. Sometimes, what we desperately seek to prove ends up proving us wrong. And sometimes, that's the greatest blessing. Because his test didn't prove her cheating. It proved her faithfulness. A faithfulness so strong that she gave up her own peace to protect someone she loved. A faithfulness he was too caught up in doubt to see. And her secret didn't prove she was dishonest. It proved his fear. A fear so deep that she thought she had to hide a crucial part of who she was. A fear he created with every suspicious glance, with every probing question, with every quiet test. What they needed wasn't a test. They needed real conversations, not proof. Vulnerability, not certainty. Trust. And real trust isn't built on surveillance. It's built on choosing to believe, even when it's scary. It's built on having the courage to be honest, even when honesty has risks. It's built on the willingness to show yourself completely, flaws and all, and stay together anyway. This family wife, husband, brother nearly shattered. Not from betrayal, but from pride. His pride wanted proof instead of trust. Her pride picked secrets over honesty. The brother's pride chose to hide rather than risk being judged. But when their pride cracked, when they all let themselves be seen in their imperfections, their fears, their real humanity, that's when real family formed. And maybe that's the real lesson. Family isn't about perfection. It's about sticking it out, choosing to stay when it's easy to walk away, choosing to forgive when it's easy to hold a grudge, choosing to rebuild when it's easy to give up. If this story hit home, if you found pieces of your own journey in these people, know you're not alone. We all have secrets. We all struggle to trust. We all fear being judged. And we all deserve love that lets us be flawed. There are more stories like this. Stories about complicated families, about messy love, about finding trust after doubt. Stories that make you think, feel, and grow. Want to experience more of these deep human stories? Want to understand the real messiness of relationships? Subscribe. Because these aren't made-up tales. They're stories of real people working through real problems. And by watching them, we understand ourselves better. In the end, the test showed the truth. And the truth revealed it all. Not the truth he was hunting for, but the truth they needed to hear. That love without trust becomes a cage. That trust without honesty is just pretend. And that honesty without courage can't exist. They found their courage. Through the pain, through the rebuilding, through hard conversations and quiet healing. They found it. And in finding it, they truly found each other. Finally. Completely. And that's the real story worth telling.